ARPA Academic Center at Stockton University, Atlantic City. I'm John Frungen, Executive Director of the William J. Hughes Center for Public Policy at Stockton. The Hughes Center is pleased to partner with the Press of Atlantic City to bring you tonight's debate among candidates for Mayor of Atlantic City. Special thanks to John Hines and Triac Streaming Networks for live streaming this debate. Here are ground rules for tonight. Both candidates will give a 90-second opening statement and end with a 90-second closing. Journalist David Danzis of the Press will pose questions to the candidates in an alternating order based on a coin flip. Candidates will have 90 seconds to respond and 1 minute for rebuttals. Tonight's debate is being conducted live, but with no audience, press, or members of the public present. Participants are socially distanced and have complied with all COVID safety regulations. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the candidates. We have the incumbent mayor of Atlantic City, Marty Small Sr., the Democrat. And opposing him is Tom Forkin, the Republican candidate. I now hand this off to Dave Danzis.
Thank you, John. Before we get started this evening, I would like to take a brief moment to offer our sincere condolences to the family and friends of Earl Harvey, who passed away yesterday at the age of 65. Mr. Harvey was an entrepreneur, a journalist, and a publisher, but he was also an advocate and an ally to Atlantic City and the Black community at large. He will be greatly missed by all those who had the pleasure of knowing him. Please join me in a moment of silence for Mr. Earl Harvey. Thank you. Our two candidates tonight are vying for a one-year unexpired term as mayor of Atlantic City. Our debate tonight is going to focus on policy issues in Atlantic City. The Press of Atlantic City solicited questions from the community to be used for tonight's debate, and almost all of the questions that will be asked this evening are the result of that exercise. In other words, these are the questions that people who live and work in Atlantic City want to hear your answers to. I want to remind our viewing and listening audiences of two significant factors beyond the control of whoever is elected mayor that will ultimately impact both their policy, implementation, and decision-making. The coronavirus pandemic has affected policy at all levels of government, and Atlantic City is no exception. Secondly, the state's continued oversight, a topic that we will discuss tonight, eliminates some of the discretionary choices the city's chief executive would typically be able to make. With that, our candidates are going to begin their opening statements. Mayor Small.
Good evening, everyone out there. Thank you for having me. And it's a great day here in the city of Atlantic City. Just briefly, I'm Mayor Marty Small Sr. I'm Atlantic City born, I'm Atlantic City bred, and when I die, I'm going to be Atlantic City dead. I'm a proud product of the Atlantic City public school system. I'm a graduate of Stockton University with a degree in communications. I have a master's degree in educational leadership from Cheney University. Professionally, I got my start working with the city and the state as a safe haven program coordinator. I was a former caseworker in a social welfare department. I then went to the Boys and Girls Club, where I was a unit director for 4.5 years, the Atlantic City public school system for 11 years, running the elementary sports, and formerly the Dean of Athletics, Recreation, and Governmental Affairs at Principal Academy Charter. I also ran the Men's Midnight Basketball League here in the city of Atlantic City. I'm a former library board member, former member of the Atlantic City Board of Education, former city councilman, former city council president, and now your current mayor. I say that to say I've been here every step of the way. I didn't wake up and say one day I wanted to be mayor. I worked hard in this community. Also, what I would like to say that no mayor has had to deal with all the controversy that I had to deal with in the last year, fighting the pandemic, governing while the change of government was in effect, looting, rioting, and more, and we stood tall for the good people of Atlantic City, and more importantly, we lowered your taxes, amongst other things. I look forward to engaging in a discussion to show you why a small plan makes a big difference, and to dream big, vote small.
Thank you, Mayor Small. Mr. Forkin.
Good evening. My name's Tom Forkin, and I'm running for mayor of the city of Atlantic City. I'm a Villanova University and Villanova Law School graduate. I previously served as the Atlantic City Police Legal Advisor, former Assistant City Solicitor for James Whalen and his administration during the largest building boom in our city's history. We developed the tunnel, the convention center, the COVID Gardeners Basin, the H-track where the Borgata presently sits, and various other projects throughout the city. I also served as a former arts commissioner. I served as the former ABC chairman who wrote the original open container legislation and lobbied for its passage recently this past year in Trenton. I'm a former ACEA Teacher of the Year in 2013. I received and was honored to receive the Hometown Hero Award in 2015. But, you know, we're here, and I would respectfully submit why we cannot afford Mayor Small for another year. 15 years of failure on City Council. As ward, his ward remained undeveloped, crime-ridden and trash-strewn with zero opportunities for residents. We lost Hammer Fiber Cable, which now forces us to pay twice as much for cable and internet. We lost approximately 40 businesses over the past 2 years on the Walk, the Pier, Atlantic Avenue, and that's roughly 1,000 jobs, including Ginsberg's Bakery. Trump Plaza, he likes to boast about the demolition of Trump Plaza. We're going to use $2 million in ratables. Our taxes are presently unsustainable in Atlantic City, and something needs to be done. So that's why I'm running for mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forkin. So after a coin toss, we have elected Mr. Forkin to begin with the first question. Both candidates are going to answer the same question. And as Mr. Ferrugian alluded to, you'll have an opportunity to rebut each other's answers as well. Mr. Forkin, both of you have invested considerable amounts of personal and professional time to Atlantic City's youth. What steps can city government take to create more educational, recreational, vocational, or social opportunities for young people in Atlantic City? Mr. Forkin?
Well, I think that it takes a certain amount of collaboration between the City of Atlantic City and the Atlantic City Public Schools. When I was a public school teacher here, I was a coach at several of the intermediate schools here in Atlantic City. I coached cross-country, soccer, and several other sports. At the high school, I coached swimming. So we need to have youth programs. We need to bring back our Little League programs. We used to have a Little League program here. We need organized soccer programs. I understand, and I've been to several cricket tournaments. You know, it would be nice to see some cricket programs also in Atlantic City. We just don't have enough organized, structured activity for our youth. I operate the Atlantic City, or the AC Surf School here in Atlantic City. I give free lessons to some of the youth in Atlantic City, teaching them junior lifeguard skills and surfing skills here at Raleigh Avenue. I'm really an advocate for diversifying the activities for our youth. In terms of after-school educational activities, I think it's important that the city assist in procuring funding and drawing private investors to help offset that expense to the taxpayer.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Small, same question. What steps?
Yes, as many of you know, that I always say that the youth and children are our two most precious resources, and you budget to your priorities, and that's what this administration has done. Coming soon and very soon, you will see the Division of Youth, Recreation, Senior, and Multicultural Services. Those sports programs that Mr. Forkin alluded to earlier, I hired Mr. Forkin as a coach when he taught at New York Avenue School with the kids. We're bringing that back. We're going to have a shared service agreement with the Board of Education that's already in place. We're waiting for final approval from the Director of Local Governmental Services, Melanie Walter, which we should receive that approval sometime at the end of this week. So when you talk about activities for youth, we're not just focusing on sports, but we're giving opportunities for fall sports, winter sports, spring sports, and more. Programs like cross country and lacrosse that typically African-American youth don't get involved in. Wrestling, I've done that. I've produced that for this community, and now that I'm the mayor and I'm overseeing, I'm going to produce it for the city. When you talk about anti-violence programs, we're going to have a program called One Neighborhood Evolution, that the city for the first time is going to grab the bull by the horns and deal with the violence in its youth and work hand in hand with the police department. When you talk about cricket, we supported the cricket team. We got them $7,500 upon learning that a lot of people was playing cricket here. The Atlantic City Iconic Dashers are their name. We're going to partner with the NFL and NBA to bring the Junior NBA and the NFL Flag Football League and the Junior WNBA. So we have a concrete plan that we set forth, and we look forward to implementing it.
Thank you. Mr. Forkin?
Well, in terms of youth sports, as Mayor Small may remember, I brought the Surfing America event, which is the Junior Olympic farm team, if you will, for the amateur surfing body here in the United States. And we have 2 Olympians that actually competed here last year. and the year before. So, and that was sponsored by the Ocean Resort. So for the past 6 years, we've enjoyed. This year, unfortunately, was canceled due to the COVID. However, you know, those are activities that we need to involve our youth and bring major sporting events back to Atlantic City.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, anything you'd like to add?
No, I would just like to say that, you know, we have to really, if you're really talking about youth, you have to mean what you say and say what you mean. That's why I'm pushing the envelope in every administration from Washington, D.C. to AC budgets to its priorities. And the youth is clearly my priority. The proposal was only 1.25% of the city's budget. If we want to take criticism from the community, we have to stand during these times. We're going to have a youth job program, which the program was recently eliminated with the Chamber of Commerce not getting the grant renewed. We have CARES Act that we got from the federal government, totaling $3.6 million that the Atlantic City taxpayers got, and we're going to put it to use for a comprehensive job program, not only for youth, adults, and retired senior citizens as well. We're going to recreate the whole community. We're going to continue to lead, and we're going to push these programs forward. And as I stated, you know, a lot of people want to talk about diversity. We're showing that we need to diversify City Hall, and we have a plan in place to bring the Office of Multicultural Affairs back to serve our growing immigrant community.
All right. Thank you both very much. We're going to move on to our next question. This one we'll start with Mayor Small. The state takeover is scheduled to last until late 2021, but an extension of Trenton's oversight appears likely. This is a two-part question. In your opinion, how has the state's presence in Atlantic City impacted residents and business owners? And what is your position on the state takeover extending beyond 2021?
Well, listen, no one has fought the state takeover harder than myself. However, once the results were in and they decided to take over, we had to be professional and do what the city's residents elected us to do, and that's make the best decisions for the great city of Atlantic City. And I've done that. I worked in partnership with the state. If any of you read MISRA, the law, the state can do any and everything they want. Me as the mayor or the residents have no recourse. However, it's smart to partner with the state. Some things I've disagreed with, but a lot of things I agreed with. They here for fiscal responsibility. One of the good things they did was settle the Bogota case. One of the good things that happened from S11 is that it kept all the CRDA money here in the great city of Atlantic City, which we're able to work with CREDA hand in hand on projects that improve this community. As far as, am I happy with the state possibly not being here afterwards? No, I want to run the city. I want to govern it fully. However, if it's going to happen, I'm going to continue to work along with the state. We do need the money. We need the resources, and nobody has been screaming about the excess revenue that goes out of here to the tune of $155.4 million than Mayor Small. When you talk about not getting revenue from sports betting, I went to Trenton and I campaigned for that. And also, it's Mayor Small and my administration that found the legislative loophole where the city of Atlantic City now gets 2% financing due to medical marijuana.
We'll circle back to that topic later on. Mr. Forkin?
Well, I think I've been very vocal on how I oppose the pilot program in S11 from Jump Street. How has the state takeover affected residents? They have taken our debt, which was roughly about $150+ million at the time, and those were budgets that were approved by the DCA for several years. The DCA in the state of New Jersey ran us into debt. Now they've taken that debt following their takeover, and they've run it up ×3. Okay, so they've tripled our debt, and it's nearing $400 million. That's unsustainable. So how has it affected our residents? We have unsustainable property taxes. They sent our revaluation to a private firm in Mount Laurel. When pursuant to state statute, you have to have the county do the reassessment, not some private firm that's coddling special interests. And this is the only city in the state of New Jersey where you could basically double and triple everyone's assessments and come back and still have $100,000 less in tax revenue at the end of the year. That's because special deals were made to special interests that coddle to the state. I would challenge the state in federal court on constitutional and civil rights grounds, and I would do that immediately if elected mayor. And as far as their extension goes, that's unacceptable.
Mayor Small, back to you if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yes, first I would tell my opponent to do his homework. Clearly,
I've done my
he
homework.
doesn't understand. For the record, in full transparency, the city's debt is currently at $556 million. And if we do nothing, meaning don't get creative or get additional revenues or get the debt service payment down, 2043, the city will be out of debt. It was a tough decision to continue to bond, but we used the Municipal Qualified Bond Act with the state of New Jersey because the city at that time didn't have any bonding capacity. So what would you do, ladies and gentlemen of Atlantic City? What would you do? Would you rather us bond that pension and health benefits, which we clearly made an agreement with the state, or interject $24 million into the budget and make the taxpayers pay it via tax increase? We did the right thing. We stabilized taxes under my watch. The last 5 years, we had 3 flat budgets and 2 tax decreases. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but we're working extremely hard. And as far as the reval, it wasn't a private company. It was a deal, a court order through the judge, along with the County Board of Taxation blessing the reval. So don't play politics and say what it was. Let's tell the people of Atlantic City the truth, the hard truth, because there is some tough decisions that need to be made.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Forkin?
Well, I mean, the hard truth is that my opponent likes to claim that he fought the state, but he didn't challenge the state in federal court on the constitutional and civil rights grounds. We have senior citizens that are being taxed out of their homes, that have been in their homes for 50 years, that are on fixed incomes, their retirement savings, their life savings. They're being taxed out of their homes. They're losing their homes. You know, that's the harsh reality. I'm not playing politics. I'm putting service above self. This is an issue that needs to be vetted. People in Atlantic City are moving out of Atlantic City at record rate. Home ownership is down. Property taxes are unsustainable. So it's $500 million debt by 2043. I hope that we're alive to enjoy that. But quite frankly, you know, the way the state has spent money like a sailor on shore leave here in the city of Atlantic City, I hardly believe that the state's doing us any favors. If they've, you know, tripled our debt already in 3 years, what are they going to do in an extension period of time? I think that if any federal court or any federal judge looks at this in a bankruptcy scenario, they decline to allow us to file bankruptcy. Look at that debt-to-income ratio. We're clearly in the green, and the state needs to go.
All right, and I would just say
Well,
this.
Mr. Mayor, I'll ask both of you, since this is a topic that I know a lot of residents are concerned about. If you two would like to continue with this discussion, we'll give you each another minute to talk about this, if you both agree on it.
Well, I just want to say this to the good people of Atlantic City. I'm going to take Wall Street's advice more than I take someone who is playing Monday morning quarterback with the decisions that this government has made. Moody's and Standard & Poor's, the same agency that gave the city junk bond ratings, have gave us a 2-tier upgrade under my watch. The auditor, Ford Scott, said that the city is so far under the spending limit, it's not even funny. We could, allowable under the law, which you should know, spend an additional $47 million of taxpayers' money. But we're not going to do that. And lastly, you keep beating this drum about suing in federal court. You have to get creative. You have to work with people. Myself or the citizens of Atlantic City is not taking advice from a disbarred attorney. Thank you.
Mr. Forkin, would like to respond?
Well, certainly you took that advice, Mr. Small, when you ran with that open container law that I drafted, but we'll just leave that one alone for now as opposed to putting out misinformation. People know what their tax rates are. They know what their tax bills are. They know how much their taxes went up. And, you know, that's a sad reality. That's a sad truth. You know, Mr. Small tries to work with the state, but it's more like working with special interests and making special deals and selling or you know, having CRETA buying property hundreds of thousands of dollars over the fair market value and then demolishing a building and giving it to a campaign contributor. But, you know, this will all come out in the wash. We just have to serve the residents as opposed to special interests here in Atlantic City. And, you know, if I'm elected, I'll work for the residents and not the special interests or the Wall Street hedge funds.
I know this is a topic that we could probably talk about all night, but we're going to move on to the next question. Mr. Forkin, the mayor of Atlantic City is granted a seat on the board of directors for the Casino Reinvestment Development Authority. How would you use that position to advance the interests of Atlantic City?
Well, I think we have to advocate for more diversity on the CRETA board. I think we only have 2 residents on the CRETA board. I think that that's unacceptable. You know, I've disagreed with some of the things that the CRDA has done in the past. It's beyond my comprehension how we can only have, I believe, only 2 African Americans on the CRETA board. Only one, Mr. Mayor Marty Small, is on the board, and I believe Gary Hill's the other resident. We need to have more residents on the board on CRETA, people that are familiar with the landscape and needs of the community, and I think that CRETA really has to do a much better job of maintaining the tourism district. Right now, I mean, I jog and bike down the boardwalk every morning at sunrise, and I look around and I see the trash-strewn boardwalk, and you know, some of the videos of the fights that happen up there late at night, it's egregious. You know, I would advocate for cleaner streets, safer streets, and really asking CRETA to start to help market some of these major things. I know the mayor's going to talk about Bader Field and some of the proposed development there. I know that Mayor Langford had Bader Field at one point sold for $800 million, and I believe the state came in and you know, terminated that deal. So that was unfortunate. You know, we need to get back to the days of development. We need more ratables on the books to assist with the tax brief, and there really hasn't been any development. I mean, literally, the largest development that we have right now in Atlantic City is a mosque on Florida Avenue. I think that that's wonderful, but we need more development to help with the ratables.
Thank you, Mr. Forkin. Mayor Small.
Instead of complaining, I'm going to tell you the things that I work with CRDA on. When you talk about getting more NCOs, which is the neighborhood coordination officers, which is going over well in this community, we're working on getting 15 more for another shift for the 4 to 12 shift. We already have the 8 to 4 shift in place. When you talk about over 50 police officers hired, including 19 Class 2 officers that are in the academy right now as we speak. When you talk about my first meeting at CRDA, when I asked them to give the residents of Atlantic City a bailout by contributing to the taxes this year, and we're currently working on more programs with the state treasury. When you talk about the vision of the city, when you talk about KY and the curb, the glory years of Kentucky Avenue, I'm working with CRDA, the Atlantic City Housing Authority, Atlantic Cape Community College, the Arts Foundation, and others to produce a building that will make our youth proud in this city. On the first floor to be the African American Northside Museum. Upstairs it will be a recording studio, video production, photography, and more. That's what we're working on with CRDA. When you talk about going to CRDA to save the Atlantic City taxpayers $500,000 in lighting that we could not pay for, that has all happened under Mayor Small's watch. When you talk about going to CRDA to fund the initial funding for the Senior Hot Meal Initiative during COVID, because all the health research show that the seniors were our most susceptible. When you talk about trying to get zoning and planning back here in the city of Atlantic City, that's what we're doing. The boardwalk, the fights, that's a police matter. We got to do better with everything like that. And when you talk about working with CRDA to truly grow this economy, we're working on an incentive program that they have for police and fire. We want to expand it to other professionals, such as professionals that teach at this fine institution and more, to grow the rateable base and make Atlantic City taxpayers get some tax relief.
Thank you, Mayor
So
Small.
that's what Mayor Small is doing.
Mr. Forkin.
Well, when you're talking about planning and development, again, I would reiterate the fact that I was part of an administration that was executed the largest building boom in the city's history. And I'm not going to repeat the projects we did. I think that you see them as you drive into the city every day, and it's a source of pride for myself and my family. But when you look at the need for development, there's a lot of promises here. But I would direct your attention to Mayor Small's history on city council. There was no development that was going on, really, to speak of. I mean, you have the 600 Nobi down in the inlet, that's about it. But we have Bader Field and large parcels of land down in the inlet that are just going to waste. I mean, there were 400, over 400 lots that CRETA owned tax-free for years. And I think many of those CRETA lots were sold for pennies on the dollar, not really benefiting the taxpayers as much as it could. But, you know, again, we get down to these out-of-town developers coming in, buying these lots for pennies on the dollar, and those types of transactions at the expense of the taxpayer have to stop.
Thank you, Mr. Forkin.
And
Mr.
I just
Small.
want to say this as a rebuttal. My opponent clearly needs to do his homework, because all the development has happened in the Great Second Ward, which I proudly served for 16 years. We had private development. Mo Vaughn, who's a baseball all-star, him and his group, the Omni Group, came in and they rehabbed Carver Hall. Not only did they rehab Carver Hall, you're talking about clean and safe. The building inside and outside aesthetically is pleasing, and over 250 cameras are going to the Atlantic City Police Station's surveillance room. And how can we forget? The largest Hope 6 grant came in the Second Ward in the United States of America then, and we completed it with the culmination of the Meadows, which took public housing in a neighborhood that I grew up in and put people in better living conditions. That's what my record shows.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Forkin, or actually, excuse me, I'm sorry, Mayor Small, you're going to start off with this next question. Safety is often cited as a primary concern by both residents and visitors, and is often noted as a primary cause of the city's negative perception. What policies will your administration enact to enhance public safety in Atlantic City?
That's a great question, and I've already met a few times with Officer in Charge, Sarkos, and we talked about it. My administration came out extremely aggressive, but due to the way that the police had to act during COVID, it kind of slowed down. But we got those patrols back on Pacific and Atlantic Avenue. That's extremely key. We need to have community policing in our police, in all of our communities, in our troubled neighborhoods, and we're working on that. And what we're doing, we're going to be proactive. As I mentioned in my opening, some of the things that's coming. An anti-violence program called One Neighborhood Evolution that I wrote. The city of Atlantic City will have boots on the ground to do preventative measures. We will have violence interrupters, people who have had checkered past but are now fully rehabilitated to go in those communities. Because let's face it, for various reasons, people don't respect cops. And what's going on in the country, a lot of people have negative perceptions. Like I said, thank God we don't have that problem here in the city of Atlantic City where we're dealing with that. I'm for increasing funding for the police, not defunding the police like people would make it. So we're just trying to make the relationship with the community and the police different. So that way, as I stated when Chief White retired, I was proud that he policed my neighborhood. I knew him on a first name basis, him and others. We have to get back to that. We got to get back to where the kids in the community know the cops, and more importantly, knowing that it's okay to be a police or a firefighter. Thank you.
We'll come back.
Gotcha.
Mr. Forkin.
Well, Mr. Danzis, it's ironic that you note that the city's negative perception. And that negative perception, as Mayor Small might like you to have you believe, is due to COVID. It's not due to COVID. The city's negative perception has been there for several years. I want to say almost since the Whalen administration, or perhaps the Guardian administration, or the Langford administration. But clearly, over the past 5 years, there's been a growing negative perception on Atlantic City, and that's especially evident since the state's takeover. The state has had biblical cuts in the public safety budget to the point where our own city fire department has to sue the city and the state for being grossly undermanned and how the city and the state have mismanaged COVID in terms of public safety. So, you know, Mayor Small likes to claim that I haven't done my homework. I've done plenty of homework on this, but it doesn't take much homework to just see it in the press every day that the city fire department has to sue to protect their rank and file. But what would I do? I would immediately hire more police officers. We're about, I would say, 175 to 180 less police officers now in the department, okay, than were there when I was the Atlantic City Police Legal Advisor. We need more police on the streets. People will not come here. Tourists will not come here if the city is filthy and there's unmanageable crime up in the boardwalk and on Pacific Avenue. I mean, Mayor Small wants to say it's a wonderful day here in the city of Atlantic City. Just drive down the street of Pacific Avenue. You have, you know, junkies walking around. It looks like zombie land up there. We need to do something, and we need to do it now. We need to change.
Thank you, Mr. Forkin.
And Mr. Forkin, it's not a wonderful day here in the city of Atlantic City. It's a great day here in the city of Atlantic City.
Okay.
As far as the city's image, it was Mayor Small who did the right thing to protect the good people of Atlantic City and get the homeless population out of town during COVID. However, I was overruled, and the homeless were allowed back. While I wanted to protect AC, all he did was sit back and play Monday morning quarterback, which is what he does. As far as the fire department suing for reasons, it's irresponsible for me to talk about because of ongoing possible litigation. But I'm gonna say this. There's 16 firefighter recruits in the academy because I fought to get the SAFER grant. Again, ladies and gentlemen, at no cost to the taxpayers. And it is the most diverse firefighter class in the history of Atlantic City, including the first Pakistani female firefighter. As far as hiring more officers, all you heard this guy, this whole debate is say, hire, 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 without understanding. Make up your mind, Mr. Forkin. Are you going to be fiscally responsible, or are you going to spin like a drunken sailor, as you allege the state to do so, when we have intel to show the opposite?
Thank you, Mayor
Thank
Small. Mr.
Well,
Forkin.
Mayor Small, I respectfully disagree. As far as the Monday morning quarterback, I deliver food to the rescue mission every Sunday. I'm out in the trenches regularly helping feed the homeless with food drives, et cetera. And as far as the SAFER grant goes, Mayor Small might like to have you believe that that was his doing, when in fact it was Congressman Van Drew who helped spearhead that SAFER grant, and that was done through the federal, at the federal level. But with that said, you know, we need more police. The money needs to come from the state. The money, frankly, is already here. It's just that the state takes 100% of it. I've always proposed that redirecting the pilot money, excuse me, the money that's taken out here in the luxury room and parking tax, which is $90 million plus pre-COVID, that money go to public safety and pay down the public safety. Once we stabilize the public safety budget, which is the vast majority of our city's budget, then we can stabilize taxes, spark home ownership and small business development, and grow our public safety rank and file.
Thank you, Mr. Forkin.
Once again, he says, give it to public safety.
Mayor Small,
but-
we're
Oh, I'm
moving
sorry,
on to the next
apologize.
question. No, that's okay. And actually, this will give you both the opportunity to sort of expand on that, because this next question ties right into that. Mr. Forkin, this one goes to you. Atlantic City has the third highest effective tax rate in all of Atlantic County, behind only Pleasantville and Egg Harbor City. Without sacrificing municipal services for residents and businesses, how can the city reduce municipal property taxes?
Well,
What steps can be taken?
again, looking at the municipal property taxes, if we retain the tax money that is taken out of Atlantic City, more specifically the luxury room and parking tax, and I created that issue. I don't believe Mayor Small, to talk about not knowing your homework. I used to go to city council meetings, and I'm on record as long as about 8 years ago going and complaining about how the state takes 100% of our luxury room and parking tax. I think you've done articles on it. So, you know, I opened those records. Those records revealed that pre-COVID, that those numbers were well up over $90+ million. But I think we need to collaborate with the county more. We have the most effectively run county in the state of New Jersey, and there is zero working relationship between Mayor Small and County Executive Denny Levinson, who, by the way, sued the state over the pilot program. The city refused to join in that suit, and when the settlement was made, the city got no money and then complained about it, but they weren't part of the suit. That was after I went to city council and begged them to join as a co-plaintiff in the suit, and as a result, we didn't get any money out of that settlement. But that issue as to the pilot was never adjudicated. So when Mayor Small says, you know, you can't sue the state, you can. You know, Denny Levinson did it. We need to collaborate with the county more. We need to have them help us effectively set our property tax rate.
Thank you, Mr. Forkin. Mayor Small.
Once again, my opponent is being extremely delusional. How do you grow the rateable base here in the city of Atlantic City? It's doing things that I'm doing as the mayor. It's recruiting developers here to bring the rateable base down. The only way that we're going to grow this great city is to reinvent itself. We need to bring the middle class back. As I stated earlier, I've been a champion, excuse me, for affordable housing here in the city of Atlantic City. Now I'm working with people like Borai and MGM Development for a major second home project. I'm there. I'm working with CRDA and an unnamed developer to fill in housing in between Ocean and the old Waterside. So when you talk about additional revenues, I'm the one where people thought I was crazy, but they don't think I'm crazy now, where the city could have gotten $15.6 million per year by raising the toll at Exit 5. They said it couldn't be done. They said, to hell with Atlantic City, but they just raised the toll for everything else. So it shows you when people are motivated to get things done, they're going to do it. And I'm going to continue to fight that good fight. When you talk about the number 90 million, it's not. It's $154.5 million, according to the data from the New Jersey State Treasury in 2018. When you talk about public safety, again, you talking about giving money to police and fire, which I fully support. What about putting money back into the homeowner's pocketbook? You don't understand that because you're not a homeowner. You don't feel our pain. And as far as relationship with the county, Denny Levison and I are fine. I was in his office in a meeting 2 weeks ago. We talked about him collaborating and shared services, assisting us with our new division of recreation, youth, senior, and multicultural service. And we also talk about various land acquisition using the county's bonding power, potentially
We'll come back
getting a
to you, Mayor
state-of-the-art recreation
Thank you.
center for the people of Atlantic City. So that's what Mayor Small is doing.
Thank you. Mr. Forkin?
It's ironic that Mayor Small called me delusional in proposing to use the luxury room and parking tax to pay down our public safety and hire more police officers. But it would also be done in conjunction with a tax reduction. I think I was pretty clear on that. But talk about delusional. Only a person that's delusional would say that it's a wonderful day here in the city of Atlantic City on national news, and then segues directly into, you know, thousands of people being unemployed in the casinos during the COVID virus and how every casino in town is closed. He touched on raising the tolls. He advocated for raising the tolls, and when he raised the tolls, he advocated for it. He wanted a portion of that going to the city of Atlantic City. Well, they did raise the tolls, and Mayor Small was ineffective in not getting one single penny for the city of Atlantic City. But with that said, moreover, the two of us are up here, only I went to the South Jersey Transportation Authority, and I vocally opposed the toll increase, which puts an undue burden against the hardworking people in and around the city of Atlantic City, and it has a chilling effect on tourism in our town.
Thank you, Mr. Forkin. Mayor Small?
Well, let me just say this. I think we can all agree. There's no one that has stood taller for the good people of Atlantic City during the pandemic than myself, starting when other municipalities, near and far, made the distinction to close their beach and boardwalk. We're not going to do what everyone else does. We're not going to govern on feelings and emotion. The governor, when he did the executive order, he said, stay at home. However, in the next breath, he said, I encourage you to go out to get some exercise, take a jog, ride a bike. What better place to do it than on the Atlantic City boardwalk? When you talk about low cases of COVID, our response has been tremendous. When you talk about stepping up for the people, being a strong voice during these tough times. Because one thing that people know, it's easy to say what you're going to do when you've never been in a position. But one thing people know about Mayor Marty Small Sr., I will never leave you or forsake you. I will never sell you out. Because my life quote is this: the ultimate measure of a man, by the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands at moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And I've always stood during challenging and controversial
Thank you.
times.
Thank you, Mayor.
And people need to know where their leaders stand when the water gets hot.
Thank you. Mayor Small, you're actually going to start off with this next question. The majority of Atlantic City residents live in rental properties, including a significant portion of the city's senior population. Prior to the pandemic, renters were routinely bringing their concerns about substandard living conditions and property neglect to the attention of city officials. What actions can the city administration take to enhance the rental housing stock in Atlantic City and ensure quality living conditions for its occupants?
That's a great question. I believe the percentage is like 76-24. That's unacceptable. And that's all that I speak to is growing the rateable base. We're not going to cut our way out of this. We're not going to rely on the state all the time. We need to get the rateable base up to make a true meaning. And we're trying. And when you talk about improving the housing stock, we were instrumental in bringing 600 Nobi here when people like Mr. Forkin and others were dead set against the project to say it would never happen due to the turmoil that was going on in the economy at the time. Now you have luxury housing here in the city. I told you about working with Borai and MGM to bring other housing stock here. And also under my watch and my administration, when I was the city council president in charge of revenue and finance and approving pilots and working along with Councilman Shabazz, now 3 of the most unkept properties in the 3rd Ward of Atlantic City is receiving a major facelift, and that's the Distant, Liberty, and Schoolhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Forkin, same question.
Well, you know, it's problematic that the majority of the properties here are rentals. We need to provide opportunities for people to actually purchase their homes. We have to stabilize the property taxes and lower the property taxes so people can afford a decent mortgage. It's ironic, though, we talk about the conditions of those rentals. We have out-of-town directors, and I suppose maybe later on we can address some of that. Our licenses and inspection director, Dale Finch, lives in Millville, Cumberland County. He's out of touch with what's going on here in Atlantic City. Also, Barbara Woolley lives in Tuckerton, Ocean County. There's a city ordinance that requires directors to live in town. Mayor Small, 15 years on city council, has failed to enforce that ordinance. As mayor, he has failed to enforce that city ordinance. I live in Atlantic City because of that city ordinance. I moved here under the Whalen administration, and then Mayor Small has the temerity to poke his finger at me and say, yeah, Mr. Forkin hasn't done anything like this, when in fact I was part of the Whalen administration during the largest boom period in Atlantic City's history. So what amazes me is we can go and he can spin this stuff, but we're talking about 600 Nobi. I didn't oppose 600 Nobi. I just said that there wasn't a market for it. And when you look at 600 Nobi, it's half empty. Half the units in that condo building are empty. And the rest of them, the vast majority of which are Section 8. So it's really technically not luxury condos in the inlet. It's Section 8 housing, which I guess it's needed, but that's because people aren't provided opportunities here in Atlantic City, and that needs to be remedied.
Thank you, Mr. Forkin.
Thank you.
I just want to nail down to the crux of the question here for both of you, though, is we're talking about there's a significant portion of renters in the city who are living in substandard living conditions. What can the city do to help those people specifically?
Well,
And I answered
want
my
him to go?
question. He was pontificating.
no, I noted the fact
it
that
is
we
your
have,
turn if you'd like to.
No. I just want to say this. First of all, he's clearly misinformed again. There's more than 50% of the people living in Nobi. And it's not about, Nobi not having bodies. It's about the product. That's the best product that we had in the city of Atlantic City in a long time. And as I stated again, you wouldn't know what's going on with taxes, real estate taxes, because you don't pay them. You're not a homeowner. So when
Marty,
I talk
half your
the talk,
administration's
when I
not.
talk the talk about lowering the people's taxes, listen, I'd rather have a 5.5% tax decrease in the pandemic than the alternative. I'm not saying that, everything is gravy. Obviously, there are problems. But the problems in Atlantic City are big, but the solution is small. We're going to get it done.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Forkin.
well, a brief response is, Marty likes to throw personal tomatoes and poke fun that, that I don't, quote, own property when in fact I have a lease purchase on my property, but, you can't close on it if you don't have reasonable property taxes. Property taxes at my home went from $7,500 a year to $17,800, where Marty's taxes didn't budge. Actually, they went down under the new ratables. But let's talk about the Section 8 at 600 Nobi. I know people in the building. That's in my neighborhood. So I'm well acquainted with what's going on at 600 Nobi. And as far as people not paying property taxes, I would say 2/3 of city council don't own homes or pay
have to take that
property
up with them.
taxes. And only one of your directors, only one out of almost over the dozen directors that you have, only one actually lives in the city and pays property taxes. Dale Finch doesn't pay property taxes. Your business administrator, Anthony Swan, doesn't pay property taxes. Your city solicitor doesn't pay property taxes. None of them live in the city or pay property taxes, and they're required to do so under
Thank
city
you, Mr.
ordinance.
Forkin. I think we got a little bit off topic on that one.
And
but-
neither
Thank
do
you.
my opponent.
Yeah,
All right, Mr. Forkin, we're gonna have a little fun with this one. Polls show that a majority of New Jersey residents favor the legalization of recreational marijuana, and most policy experts believe voters will vote in favor of legalization in November. It's a two-part question. What is your position on legalizing recreational marijuana? And assuming the ballot measure passes in November, how should Atlantic City approach legalized recreational marijuana to balance the interests of residents and business?
Well, that's an excellent question. And, I could get into it in a little bit more detail perhaps at a later date. But, I supported medical marijuana as use. Recreational marijuana, I've supported over the years the concept, okay, because I think that if it's regulated, and my proposal was, and I've discussed this back when I was the Alcohol Beverage Control Board chairman, that quite frankly, looking at recreational marijuana would be regulated very similar to how you regulate alcohol. You know, individuals would have to be 21 years of age or older. You know, you would have to control it. It would be controlled and taxed by the state. But I think certainly if it's occurs in Atlantic City, that we should get more than just 2% of you know, any of those types of activities here in the city of Atlantic City. So in concept, I do support it. It needs to be regulated. I think it's a huge revenue generator for the state of New Jersey, but I think that we need effective government at the state level to appropriately address the state finances with that tax revenue. And I think looking at the mismanagement over the years of the state budget and the mismanagement of the city budget under Mayor Small and City Council over the past 15 years, that we need to really implement a plan to direct some of that tax revenue back to the taxpayers of Atlantic City.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Forkin. Mayor
Once
Small?
again, my opponent wouldn't understand mismanagement of taxes because he's not a taxpayer. As far as he's continuously unprepared during this debate, the people of Atlantic City don't deserve to hear. We'll talk about it at a later date. The later date, the election will be over. I'm morally against marijuana. Never smoked it. I'm totally 100% against it. However, when you represent the greater good of a community, you got to take your personal beliefs and feelings out, feelings and emotions, as I often say, and do what's best for the city of Atlantic City. Once again, my opponent is unprepared and failed to do his homework. That 2% is what the Small administration found. The 2% is not in recreational. The tax on recreational is talked about possibly 11%, which if the city of Atlantic City can get an additional revenue stream, which I've been fighting for my entire time, outside of just saying parking luxury, when we know the deal with that, I'm going to support marijuana, and I'm going to support it wholeheartedly. I will be voting yes, because I think that there's a unique opportunity. Also, I'm going to ask the state of New Jersey and the legislature, upon successful passage, to give Atlantic City a 3 to 5 year pilot program where the only place in New Jersey that you can do recreational is in Atlantic City. What would that do? That will create a windfall of tax revenue, job opportunities. It will bring a new industry here, and it will be regulated by a police department, similar to the open container law that he said that he authored. You can't author when you're not a legislator and you're a disbarred attorney.
Thank you,
It's
Mayor
the
Small.
executive order that Mayor Small did that cultivated this industry and kept businesses open during COVID, which this city handled very well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Forkin?
Well, you know, it's very funny to hear my opponent now again getting very personal, and I won't go into his personal issues because I guess we'll read about those in the paper coming up, or if you don't already know about them, you can Google them. But with that said, as far as me not doing my homework, I've done my homework, and I think the people here have listened to the debate tonight thus far and heard a good deal of information. You know, I would support it morally. I don't.
I'm just curious. I just want to interject. Mayor Small said he would vote in favor for it. Will you be voting in favor of it?
I've already voted for it.
Sorry to interrupt you. I
No, that's
apologize.
okay. I mean, I've already voted for it because it's going to pass, and I think that we need a plan, you know, to ameliorate the issues of concern of people. I think it needs to be regulated, and I think that, yeah, I did author that, and you voted against it several times on City Council as far as the open container legislation. Okay, I wrote the law that your city solicitor refused to do the legal opinion. I not only did the original legal opinion, okay, but I lobbied for it. I met with Senator Chris Brown, and we got the ball moving. I drafted the original piece of legislation. So, you know, you need to do your homework, Mr. Mayor, as opposed to stealing my homework and then claiming credit for it for the open container law that you claim
Thank
that
you, Mr. Forkin.
made happen.
And I'm
Mayor
going to just
Small,
make a
1
brief
minute.
comment.
1 minute.
As they say in sports, it's a copycat league. My success is a copycat league. Because while our small businesses were hurting,
That's
I was
why
in the
drafted it.
office while you were out campaigning, pontificating, and doing whatever you do on a daily basis. I was meeting with the business people of this great city. And it was my executive order that we were going to have until November that we wrote, that we approved, they got it done. Shortly thereafter, the state of New Jersey followed suit and gave the ultimate approval. So, Mr. Forkin, you can sit here tonight and talk about all these briefs and everything that you've wrote and everything that you've done, the bottom line, men, women, political opportunists like yourself lie, but the numbers and the facts don't.
Thank
Marty,
you.
the only
Gentlemen,
person
we're
here
going to
that's
move on because
lying
we're
is
running
you.
short on time. Thank you. I'm actually going to jump to our last question, and then I'll give both of you an opportunity for your closing remarks. The vandalism, this is actually a question that is going to be directed to each of you with a little bit of a different angle here. The vandalism and looting after the George Floyd rally in May gave Atlantic City a black eye. Mayor Small, what would you have done differently in that situation?
I would have done nothing different. And I don't pride myself on being politically correct. I'm passionate about this city. I love this city. And as I often said, I die for this city. I put myself in harm's way out there doing the looting. And that's what a real leader does. Later that night, I held a press conference. And it wasn't politically correct. But I made a clarion call to this community. When you look at my response to the looting and violence, I'll take it over any city in America. Atlantic City had a cup of coffee with the violence, a few hours, and that was it. And that was leadership. We put the curfew in place, and we told the people that did it that they will be punished to the fullest extent of the law, and they were. And also, when other politicians say what's politically correct, oh, defund the police and, everything, I stood up there and I supported my fine men and women in blue of the Atlantic City Police Department. Because, like I said, I don't go along to get along. Because at the end of the day, a leader knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And since I've been mayor of this great city, nothing has been perfect. I've done a great job in leading us during tough times, and I'm going to ask you to continue to let me serve another year, to continue to get my agenda across, to make Atlantic City the place that we know it will, can, and should be. And we'll come back to you about the 4-year term and closer to June. But that's all I'm asking for now.
Thank you, Mayor. And obviously, Mr. Forkin, I can't ask you what you would have done differently. Instead, we'll pose the question, what would you have done in that situation if you were
Well,
there?
it's ironic that you would ask. I went in support of Black Lives Matter. I attended the event. I laid face down in the street, with my arms behind my back, and Steve Young was coaching us to say, can't breathe. We marched through the city. He made a window shopping comment. We walked through the walk. We went up on the boardwalk, and Mayor Small was up on stage, and Steve had given the microphone at that time over to some out-of-town individuals that were, starting to chant, right in front of Mayor Small, whatever the police, they were chanting against the police. So that's at the point where I walked away. I thought that may be a good time for maybe Mayor Small to grab the microphone, being in his position, and he does stand tall because he's a tall guy. Could have grabbed the microphone and maybe kind of squashed that at that time before the looting and said, okay, this doesn't have any place here. We're not going to go there. We're not going to destroy our town. But, he didn't do that. He took a photo op that later that night with some of his friends that went down and videoed him pretending to break up or chase looters out of stores, under police protection. And then the next day, we received an email that night to go down with a church group and help clean up the walk, which we did. So we're down there about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, sweeping up glass throughout the city. Creta had already done a good bit of it through Sid. And then Mayor Small shows up about 11:30 with the camera crew and TV crew and a variety of other people for another photo op. So, some people are show horses, some people are work horses. I'm a workhorse.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Forkin. Mayor Small.
In life, ladies and gentlemen, I believe there's 3 types of people. There's people that talk about making things happen, like Mr. Forkin. There's people that want to make things happen, like Mr. Forkin. And then there's people like me that make things happen. Everyone saw that I stood tall during that time. And I think it's disingenuous when you want to say that I should have grabbed the microphone during the Black Lives Matter protest. I wasn't doing that. So you want some stripes because you laid on the ground with your hands behind your back? Congratulations. That was a photo op for you. Look at Tom Forkin.
I didn't get my picture
us
taken there,
stand
Marty.
there. What does it mean to lay down? I'm not going to be a part of anything just to say Black Lives Matter. I'm a black man, a proud black man. And what's going on in this country is not a good thing. And I hurt every single day. So I'm never going to participate just to say, oh, Black Lives Matter. What does it mean? What we did was give it some meaning. I said I wasn't going to put Black Lives Matter on the street and then walk away. So what we did, we made Black Lives Matter month in the city of Atlantic City, the month of September. And we're going to provide entrepreneurial programs, educational programs, and we're going to educate
Thank you,
people
Mayor.
on the history.
We're
However,
getting close
I
to
said
time.
Black Lives
Mayor.
Matter, but I believe
We've
all
only got
lives
a few
matter.
minutes
It was
left,
on my
Mayor.
T-shirt. And I said, in order for all lives to matter, Black lives has to matter. So all of this buffoonery that you're speaking.
Thank you, Mayor. We have to wrap up. We only have a few minutes left. I'm
I
sorry. I don't mean to
apologize.
cut you off. Mr. Forkin, you have a minute, please.
Just briefly, Mayor Small likes to, again, he likes to use the word pontificate. I don't think anybody pontificates more than Mayor Small. He says he likes to make things happen. He's had a record of 15 years on city council. So if he likes to make things happen, things would have happened. We would not have this image of a crime-ridden or trash-strewn streets in the city of Atlantic City. After 15 years, if he does a fraction of the things that he says he's capable of doing, we would not have these issues that we have today. I think his record speaks for itself. It's a record of failure, okay? And I think that that has to be viewed by the voters.
Thank you, Mr. Forkin.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, that is all the questions we have this evening. You now each have 90 seconds for your closing remarks. Mr. Forkin, if you would.
Thank you. Probably won't need 90 seconds, but I think the residents of Atlantic City know. You live in Atlantic City, you drive around town, you could see how the city has fallen into a state of disrepair. This is before COVID. This is not, Mayor Small will blame COVID for everything from here till the horizon. But Atlantic City was experiencing problems before that. Again, the loss of jobs. 40 businesses closed. You had the Melting Pot, Ruby Tuesdays. You had the Apple Store that left. You had the legendary Ginsberg Bakery left. 1,000 jobs left in only a period of 3 or 4 years. City Council did nothing. They didn't approach those businesses to try to get them to stay. As a matter of fact, Ginsberg went to Camden for whatever reason. And I believe that they may have received some CRDA money. But let's talk about CRDA for a second. Okay, CRDA needs to have a more effective relationship with the city of Atlantic City to benefit the taxpayers, not to benefit the special developers where CRETA purchases a property on Tennessee Avenue for over $100,000 over fair market value, and then Mayor Small votes in favor of that, and then they turn around and they're going to give it to an out-of-town developer to expand their development, basically for nothing. That developer is going to save $200,000. These are the types of backroom deals that happen. So as far as
Mr.
doing my
Forkin, 10
homework,
seconds, please.
I've done my homework. And those are the types of things that need to stop, and those are the types of things that hurt our ratables and injure our taxpayers.
Thank you. Mayor Small,
All right.
90 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for indulging my opponent and myself tonight. Good job, Tom. It's crystal clear. My opponent said in a previous debate that he tried to recruit me unsuccessfully to the Republican Party to run for mayor. So it's clear that my opponent endorsed me as well. This is a serious situation, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor's office in the great city of Atlantic City is not an internship, and it's not take your child to work day. It's serious business, and you have to have people that know what they're doing, not some political gadfly who sits on the sideline and everything that goes wrong in the city, he points the finger. What is his plan for jobs? What is his plan to clean up the blight? You didn't hear any of that. I have a plan. I put my plan up in front of 1,200 people at the MBCA and told them department by department what I wanted to do. Now, this debate style wasn't about accomplishments, but one of the things that they said that couldn't be done was tear down Trump Plaza. Guess what's happening January 29th? After the Democrats tear Donald Trump down on Election Day, we're going to tear Trump Plaza down. Lastly, we're going to continue to government with the elements of my acronym-based theme called Let's Ace It. We're going to lead with leadership, expectations, transparency and stability, accountability, credibility, and excellence in execution. It does none of us any good to have all of these big, robust plans if you don't have the personnel or the knowledge
10 seconds,
to execute them. Atlantic City, you know me. I'm not a stranger. In my opening, I showed you every step of the way, and it's not been a smooth road, but we will get better. I'm telling you, a small plan makes a big difference. My administration and me as the mayor is what all your hopes and dreams are made of for the great city of Atlantic City.
Thank you,
So
Mayor.
dream big, vote small, and for the school board, vote Johnson, Barnes, and Bailey, together AC. I'm Mayor Marty Small Sr.
Thank you.
And I approve this message.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both for your time this evening. I do
you.
appreciate your participation. I want to thank Stockton University for hosting us. I want to thank TriX 57 for all their help tonight. Don't forget, Election Day is November 3rd. Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Thank you for having us.
Cool.